Rejection is a privilege. If you've gotten an opportunity and you have a clear answer, you should feel blessed and you've got some action items on how to move on. It is much better than a maybe or someone dragging you along. So rejection is a privilege because it's expected. It's going to keep happening for the rest of your life. So if you assume it, great, you're already winning.
Welcome to Girls Make Bank, the podcast show for women who want to learn the art of selling for business and for life. I'm Jack White, seasoned sales professional, entrepreneur, and owner of Honeybees Group. Come back each week to hear inspiring stories from some of our favorite female business owners. Learn how to take the ick out of selling and make bank. We're all in this together, so let's get started. Hi, and welcome to Girls Make Bank. If you are here for the first time, welcome. If you have been here before, welcome back. I am very excited today to have Kat Weaver, the founder of Power to Pitch, joining us today. Kat helps women, founders and entrepreneurs secure funding through rehearsing and practicing their pitch to investors and really getting them prepped and primed to go out and raise capital. So I am super excited to talk to her today about how we can take the skills and the training that she provides to her entrepreneurs and apply them into our own lives. Kat, welcome.
I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm excited about this topic because the pitch and communication side of things really falls into so many different categories, not just investment in capital. So we've got some jam-packed questions and exciting things to cover.
Yeah, I think that's so right. And I think people underestimate the importance of practicing the pitch. A lot of people feel like they know their business inside and out. They feel like they know their products or their services inside and out, and underestimate how important it really is to fine tune the actual mechanics of pitching. We're going to dig into that. But first, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your background. And you have a really interesting story about how you decided to launch Power to Pitch. And I'd love to hear about it.
So I like to say I'm a two-time accidental founder. I intended to go to medical school, but instead started a company out of my dorm room. And I at first, it was really exciting. I had people knocking on my dorm room door to buy this product. And shortly after starting the company, I actually lost everything to a fire. And so the only thing that I really had was my voice of who I was, what I was building, and what I needed. And a professor had told me to go pitch the business and enter a pitch competition. So my claim to fame is that I won 22 of 23. And it wasn't that I was naturally good at it. It was just a means of survival, really. I didn't have a natural network or connections or handouts. And I realized that along the way, I met so many other founders who struggle to talk about themselves, what they do, and what they need. So I was kind of helping them on the side. I had a side hustle to my startup and realized that it was much more rewarding, and I was even better at it than running the first company. So I did it for 6 years, everything from retail, Amazon, even Good Morning America 4 times. So the pitching led into a lot of different areas, and I successfully sold and exited, and then founded Power to Pitch with the whole mission of helping founders get funded faster, because I realized so many incredible founders out there who deserve money. And there were these small, seemingly simple changes and things to focus on that I knew that if they fixed and we went through, there's a method to the madness, as I like to say. And, we've gotten founders over 25 million in grants and venture capital and counting. And as of just yesterday, $360,000 in investment and $90,000 in grants. So there's a lot of money to be had.
That is transformational for these entrepreneurs, that amount of capital. And I think so many things that you said in that short intro, I think are really powerful. Is one, the grit and the tenacity of entrepreneurship. When literally your whole business burns down and you pick up the ashes and you say, okay, I need to forge a path forward. That is the essence of entrepreneurship in so many ways. And I think also identifying that there's a need for a service that you have. And sometimes your side hustle becomes your main hustle when, the market is telling you there's an opportunity here. And I just love that you're helping women raise capital, because we know that women are severely underfinanced in the world of VCs. And so being able to really help them get that important resource into their business is amazing. Now, I know that you primarily work with founders who are raising capital, but I think that the power of pitching and having a tight pitch and the skill of pitching translates into lots of different environments. So, because this is your business, why is having a tight, rehearsed, perfect pitch really crucial to founders? And how do you translate that into other sales environments?
So would say that a lot of the themes are similar. And actually, so my husband is in the midst of applying for a new position within his company, and I've been drilling him and practicing his answers too. So we do a lot of practice in a lot of ways, and I've never had a corporate job, but I can tell where there is a lack of clarity and confidence in an answer. I can already tell where it's going to directly affect someone's perception of you. And I've helped founders with their communication, mostly on the grants and then venture capital side of things. But we've helped numerous founders with this language, and they've gotten more sales. They've gotten into more retailers. They've been able to push off funding because they've clearly articulated what they need, and it's led to more opportunity. And then also potential mentors and advisors. So when you are able to articulate that kind of vision, it's going to give people this feeling and this sense, and they're better able to empathize with you, create connection, create the right introductions. And I think a lot of founders and anyone really underestimates that because it's not all natural to us. I used to be someone who, when speaking, I would get nauseous. I didn't want to be, and I don't enjoy the awkward networking events and things like that, and talking and pitching myself and all of that. But it was something that had to be practiced over and over again because, again, means of survival for myself and the business. And it served me in so many ways. So I'm a living testament to that. And I'm so bullish on helping founders and other individuals, even going for a great corporate job, is it's something that should be rehearsed and practiced because it does make a difference.
You mentioned something that, you'd get sick, you'd feel ill and nervous, nauseous when you were getting ready to pitch. And I think so many people relate to that. And I talk a lot about having to do the uncomfortable things until they become comfortable or more comfortable. So many times I think we are hesitant to do something that's uncomfortable. So if we don't want to pitch, if we don't want to sell, if we don't want to, whatever it is, we just avoid it in our business. And your business will suffer because of that. What you have to do is do the work with a strategy, with some help, with people like you to, develop a strategy and a framework and do it, practice, rehearse until it becomes second nature to you.
And one of my favorite quotes, and I can't remember who came up with this, it wasn't me, but I think about it often in that it's the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding. So even when I have a project or opportunity that feels so overwhelming and scary and even gut wrenching, it's really just a mindset shift that needs to happen because I go through that on a weekly basis, let me tell you.
That hits home to me so much. That is amazing. What do you think are the essential components of a pitch that, whether you're a founder, sales professional, what are the essential components that you always need to include?
I think the biggest component is a why, story, and or emotional connection, and leading with that. And that I think applies to 99.9% of every opportunity that you've had. And it's just because I personally experienced that is if someone doesn't understand your situation or what's at hand, you're able to invite them into your world or educate them or actually give them something to remember. And we like to say that people remember the transformation that you share, not just the information that you give. It's more memorable, it's more repeatable. That's something that's proprietary to you. So if you can create, even if it's a short connection on a story or find that level of balance within just a data dump or, oh, I need your money, that's something I think that is number one. And two, in terms of preparation, I think it's situational, right? Based on what you want and who your audience is, but tactically writing down high level bullets or even some sort of script to run through and have that memorized is something that's underestimated. Because again, whether it's sales based on the audience, a specific opportunity, you might even have a rubric for, you're going to want to make sure you have the essentials in there, but ending with some sort of clear ask is also something I think to mentally prepare ahead of time, is to think about if you were to have some sort of ask, what that would look like. And in between that story and that ask, things can fluctuate, but that is a beginning and then that is an ending, I think are key.
The emotional why. I love the transformation. We hear so much about like the transformation statements, like connecting with people emotionally. I love the idea of scripting and bulleting. I do that all of the time in my business. And I mean, coming from a sales background, my sales leaders always had us practicing our pitches, practicing our craft. And I think that's super important. You can never sort of over practice. I think you can over memorize and, like have a script rehearsed too much or memorize too much, but I don't think you can over practice. And the why, the ask and the why, super, super important. You mentioned something and I want to dig in a little bit more. What are your thoughts on how much you should vary your pitch depending on who you're talking to? Because there's different sort of schools of thought on that. So, I mean, certainly investors versus clients versus, marketing relationships, how much should your pitch change depending on who you're talking to? And then what elements remain the same?
I'm sure I'll get some disagreements on this, but not a lot should change, because if you're going to go in with, this is who I am or the why, this is the problem, and this is what I'm offering, and this is how I want to help, or this is what I need, it shouldn't vary that much. When you think about your brand story and offering, if you're pitching, I'm going to use this investor example. So hopefully this is an easy one. And this, again, relates to different clients as well and your target consumer. But from an investor perspective, when you're giving up equity in your company to investors, that means that those investors, you become on the same team. So if you're pitching different investors, different outputs, values, visions of the company, you aren't going to get people coming together in the same mindset on really the same team. They should be extremely similar. You might be more technical to one compared to the other, or deep dive more into maybe the e-commerce versus your retail strategy or whatever the specifics might be. But I really don't think it should vary that much, especially, your core networking pitch, because at the end of the day, we say too, from an investor perspective or even a client perspective, you don't want to assume someone is your target consumer. You want to educate them and have them think about, hey, if I'm not the target consumer, how and who can I make a connection to in regards to their target consumer? Because you've built that sort of confidence and trust in even a short period of time.
And I think the why doesn't change, the why you're doing something. And to your point, even if they're not your target consumer, the transformation that your target consumer gets doesn't change, right? And so the value of what you're doing remains the same. So I tend to agree. I think 80% of what you pitch should remain the same, and then depending on the situation, right? If it's an investor versus a client versus something else, the ask may change and the level of detail that you go into. I think that was a really good point, might change, but the why and the transformation is the same. What are some of the common mistakes that you see people making when they pitch, and what do you tell your founders to do to avoid them?
So I'm going to do my best to keep this short because we could be here all day.
Lots of mistakes, lots of mistakes. Bring it to us.
And I will say that, yeah, in our programs for founders that are fundraising and looking for grants, we have a channel literally labeled "No Stupid Questions." So I don't believe in a stupid question. It's not a natural industry to be in. So we encourage all sorts and types of questions. But I would say that one of the biggest mistakes, and I see this in sales, clients, pitching to investors, pitching for grants, you name it, that people use and overuse non-specific buzzwords. Unique, revolutionary, best in class, disruptive, holistic, sustainable. And so we say you want to emulate that. You want to make someone feel that you're unique without having to say you're unique. So instead of using that phrase, we say replace it with a small specific phrase that outlines that. So it's so much more clear without having someone to press or feel like they're stupid for asking questions. And we had one founder yesterday pitching who said, our toothbrush is the best. There's nothing in the world like it. We said, you got to make us feel that instead of having to force it on us, because now we're thinking of things that we could poke holes in.
We're not on your side right now. We're trying to disagree with you. Yeah.
Yes. And so in this, again, in any instance, the buzzwords are a huge red flag, or rhetorical questions. Did you know? Why? And then you answer directly. It's so cliche and it's pretty cringy. So I never recommend a rhetorical question, even in leading, because it just kind of gives an eye roll. And then the third biggest is industry jargon. You never know how experienced someone is, and you don't, we say pitch to an investor like they're 5 years old, pitch to a consumer like they're 5 years old, because if you overdo it, you never know if you're excluding them from the conversation because they were confused. And maybe you have a little bit more background if they are super technical, but if you have to spell it out, no one's going to judge you for that. And the more high level you can be in weight and incite questions, the more comfortable you're going to make your audience. So those are my big three.
I love those. As you were talking, I was thinking, because I'm about a third of the way through the Power to Pitch programming on your website. I actually subscribed and I'm going through it. And I feel like even if you're not going for grants, the content that you're providing in terms of how to communicate, how to put together your pitch, how, like you're saying, the language to use, the language to avoid is super valuable for anyone that is, going out and trying to get business in some way. Rejection is a big part of this. Certainly, I've raised money before from VCs and just, selling in general. Rejection stings, doesn't feel good. It's a part of life, but not necessarily a part that we enjoy. And people handle it in different ways. What do you tell your founders and your clients about how to handle rejection, but also the difficult and uncomfortable questions that can come up during these pitches? How do you prepare yourself for that? And how do you not lose your flow when you're in that moment?
So there's a lot to unpack in this one. I would say that the first thing that comes to my mind is that rejection is a privilege. If you've gotten an opportunity and you have a clear answer, you should feel blessed and you've got some action items on how to move on. It is much better than a maybe or someone dragging you along. So rejection is a privilege. And because it's expected, it's going to keep happening for the rest of your life. So if you assume it, great, you're already winning.
I love that you just flip that on its head. Be grateful for the rejection. I love that.
In the founder world, let me tell you, because man, you have some really low lows and really high highs, and you have to, really the only things that will get you through those dark moments and those feelings of despair is the gratitude in that sense. And I wish I had implemented that kind of mindset sooner, and I'm still actively working on it. It's not perfect. I still have those feelings of frustration and self-doubt and all those fun things, right? But the reminder that rejection is a privilege will really shift how you feel and then react to certain things. Two, I would say, we see founders who have really excellent pitches, and then we purposely do a mock investor call with them in our investor specific program, and we drill them on questions to see what their answers are. And we see so many struggle and falter. So we recommend that you actually have a subset of questions that you might not be familiar or comfortable answering, and you practice a clear, concise, and short answer to them. Or it's okay to say, I don't have that right now. I'm happy to get back to you with that. Because that way you're not oversharing, over talking, and you've dug yourself a deep hole. So the practicing answers to potential questions is key. And like with my husband who's interviewing right now, I said, don't assume these core things. If you were to be asked this, how would you react? And at first he said, oh, there's no way I'm going to be asked that. And I said, well, what's to say you can't prepare for it? You're going to be winning if you prepare for it. So just keep these things in mind. And then lastly, I would add in terms of the rejections is logging feedback from the rejections, because some single opinion should not really fully be taken to heart. But if you're getting multiple comments and you're able to log them and be methodical about it, then you know when and how to implement it in what ways. Because, when you're going to have to talk to 100 plus investors before your first yes. I mean, that's just part of the industry right now, and women only raise 1.9% of the available venture capital. So the odds are not in our favor, right? So we have a feedback tracker. We say, don't take one person's bit of advice. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Don't go changing your whole business and your whole pitch deck. Log the feedback. When you start to see a pattern and a theme, that's when you know how to implement it. So it's not an overwhelming process.
Use the rejection as a learning opportunity too. Not necessarily pivot, but potentially get better and address it on the front end. We've talked a lot about practicing the pitch, rehearsing, anticipating questions. I think a lot of people go out and pitch. We talked about it at the top. Underestimate the importance of practicing, underestimate the importance of the pitch. Let's say you're doing the prep. How do you know when you're ready to go out and pitch?
You might never feel ready. I would say that I wish I could practice 100 times more. So I don't personally use or recommend that as a sign or a starting point, because if I had waited until I felt ready for any opportunity, I would have missed 100 of the best things to ever happen to me. So I think that, well, what we recommend in terms of actual pitch practice is using a tally system. So for a big opportunity, practicing a minimum of 50 times and tallying it to keep track, we can tell if someone's practiced 10, 20, or 50 times. It is so clear to see if the energy is low, if they're nervous, if they request to use a note card. If you have a serious opportunity, it's going to be appreciated that you know what you're talking about. And yes, you do with your business, but as founders, and even when you're in sales, you might be so close to it or so passionate that you tend to overshare or think about the wrong things. So practicing the articulation 50 times is a recommendation. And my parents used to make fun of me because they said, we never want to hear your pitch ever again. We know exactly what you're going to say. And I said, well, it's working, so why would I change it? And we kind of laughed about it. But I mean, it's necessary for success.
And I think, I was going to ask you about, how, pitching is a high pressure situation, how you sort of keep your head in the game, keep your nerves in check. What do you recommend the mindset be for people who are going into these big pitches? How do you not let the nerves overtake you, especially when this is so uncomfortable for a lot of people?
So pressure is also a privilege. And I believe that the adrenaline that we get it's human. It's not something you can just force away. There's tactics to help manage it. And I think it also depends on the person. I found that a few things really work for me and they don't really work for other people, and you kind of have to test. For me, the practicing until I can walk around the house and do my pitch in a distraction, in a different room, recording myself. Then I knew that if I was so nervous because I felt like I would black out when I'm talking, that my body already knew what to do. And then another one would be in recording myself, pausing, and then going to watch it. So I wasn't constantly too close to it. So actively taking breaks was something that was healthy for me, and maybe adding in some extra people and perspective to do that was also helpful for success, because I could only see so much at the end of the day.
I think recording is such an important thing that people skip. I think you can rehearse a bunch of times, but until you see it and hear it back, I think you miss an element because you don't know what you sound like. You don't know what you see or what you look like when you're delivering something. And I saw somewhere, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, but when you are recording yourself doing something, to watch it back 3 times, once with your eyes closed so that you're just listening, once with the sound off so that you're only viewing it, and then once with both sound and visuals there to get the full experience. And I've actually done that, and it's pretty enlightening to see, oh, this is what I only sound like. This is what I only look like. This is what it looks like together. And that I think recording and rewatching is a great way to sort of see what the other person on the end of the table is going to be looking at.
I've never heard of that, but I really like that tactic. I think that's really, really smart because I've seen some people where their hands are flailing all over their place, or they're shifting, or they're rocking in their chair. Or I was at an event speaking last night and we did a founder company spotlight. And this guy was so nervous that he kept moving his feet. And I was so distracted by him looking like he was breaking his ankles while trying to talk. He was so nervous from speaking that I couldn't even hear what he was saying, which seems so silly, but the body language is an important element. I think that's really smart. And one last thing that I do is there is, I believe it's a Navy SEAL breathing technique or something called box breathing, where you breathe in for counts of 4, you hold your breath for 4, and then breathe out for 4, and you repeat it just 3 times before you go out for a big event. And it helps regulate the nervous system. Again, testing the few things that resonate with you are is the way to go.
Box breathing. I'm going to look into that because I'm a big like controlling your breath to sort of control, calm down, get centered is good. Can you give us an example either from yourself or one of your clients where pitching just went wrong? You prepped, you thought you were prepared, you walked in, you were, one of your clients and didn't go right. What happened, and what do you learn from that, and how do you avoid it the next time?
So this is one of my favorite examples that has a both negative and positive effect to it. So we had a founder who was actively raising money and pitching to 8 investors, and the founder's screen froze. And the majority of founders that I see who do make this error have something horribly or even worse happen to them, is that they have relied on this pitch deck for so long to cue them to speak, to help bring their pitch to life, to bring the product to life. And they're so dependent on it that they completely lose focus in what they should be saying in engagement. But this founder, we had forced her to work on this for so long. And we urge that founders or anyone, sales, whatever it might be, communicate in a way where someone doesn't have to see what it is to get it. You should be able to visualize it with your words. And this founder did such a good job that no one told her deck was off or not clicking through. Everyone just kind of sat through the presentation, 8 investors. She ended up oversubscribing her round, not in that exact moment, but they all said, wow, you did such a great job. We were so impressed by your ability to still tell us what was happening, and you recovered and laughed from it well versus being flustered, and then answered questions lightly and referenced back the slide. It was so well done and professionally executed because she had practiced that and then chose to not really rely on that pitch deck. So I think a major mistake happens is when a founder comes to us and they say, oh no, I need to use the deck. Can I just show my deck? You won't get it if you don't see it. And that's a huge red flag. And that's a sign your communication needs to be fixed if you're relying on that.
Yeah. And I love that this founder took what could have been a bomb moment, right? And freeze and scramble to try to figure something out and rolled with it. Knew the product, knew the business, practiced enough that they were just able to keep it moving. And I think you gain a lot of respect from the other people in the room that you don't get flustered and there it kind of brings you up on the rung a little bit of the ladder of like, oh, this person like has their ish together, because what could have thrown them off, what maybe would have thrown me off, they were able to just kind of move through it. And that's where the right preparation becomes really important. What are your top 3 tips for perfecting a sales pitch that people can start doing today?
Number 1 is do not underestimate writing out, at least bulleting the things that you want to say in the order in which you want to say them, because the order matters. The psychology in sales matters. So either bullet pointing or a full script to help you get some of that language down. It also helps you avoid unnatural pauses or the overuse of or certain sentence fragments and things like that, or unnatural transitions. So I think that's something that's really helpful. Number 2 is the amount of practice that should be put in. We see so many people say, "Oh, I don't need to do that," or "Oh, I can I use a note card, or can I use a script, or this or this," and it's just lazy. And so the planning and buffering the time to put in to practice is important. I'll bring up my husband one last time in this example. I'm trying to force him to do these questions, and someone who pitches for a living, so I'm really, really into that. And I saw him watching TV when he's got this interview, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I should be good." And I asked him one of the questions, and he fumbled, and I said, "You should be able to answer that on the spot." And so he looked at me all annoyed, turned off the TV, and went back to practicing the answer. So call me horrible or not. But I said, "You didn't practice enough." And I could totally tell. And it's going to be apparent when you have one shot at this opportunity. So he gave in and appreciated it later, but not in the moment.
Yeah. Often the case with our guys. Appreciate it later, not in the moment.
Yeah. And then number 3 is to not underestimate and not avoid researching who you're about to speak to. You should never make assumptions. You should go all CSI, find their social media, LinkedIn, company website, Facebook if you can. You never know. If you can find a point of connection in some way, it's going to already put you on the next rung in that next tier. So the research of who you're speaking to, I'd probably put that higher up on the list to really look at, because that's going to help you guide the conversation in a more efficient way.
Yeah, I love that. And I think people often forget that. I'm so glad you brought it up. If our listeners want to improve their pitching and their sales skills, what tools or resources or books or courses do you recommend they look to?
Well, I'm biased, but our fundraising course and grant course for any entrepreneurs from 0 to 2 million in revenue, that's what they're there for. We're really, really good at it. We've got the success stories to prove it. But I'd say for those just starting out or maybe not going and looking to raise money, one of my favorite books on the subject is called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. He has one of the most popular TED Talks, but I liked a lot of the extra examples that come through in that book, and I read it often. And that's kind of how you think about bringing in that story and an emotional connection to thing. It's literally starting with your why. So that's a really great one. And then in terms of, I think LinkedIn is a great place. There's a lot of people there. Education and support is free. I post daily pitch tips, opportunities, other resources and tools to think about at Cat Weaver. And then lastly, a tool that I think is great for speaking support is called Speeko, Speeko. It's a Chicago-based founder, and it's a public speaking coach app. So you talk into it live or upload, and it will literally give you suggestions on how to improve your speaking.
I need that. I want that. I want to share it with everybody. Speeko. And I can vouch for Power to Pitch. I think it's a good program for anyone who is pitching to go through for the communications aspect. And also, I think people have access to capital. A lot of different businesses do that maybe don't think they do. So this idea of like getting grants, that's non-dilutive, free money. It definitely takes work pitching for that, but I encourage people to take a look at what grants are out there for your business and to see if you qualify and if you can get some additional funds to use towards, product development, growth, marketing, whatever it might be.
I always tell founders to think about the ROI. Oh, I don't have enough time. That's a lack of prioritization, because one time, and I say this because I complained to my dad, I said, "I don't want to apply for this grant." It was $5,000. And he looked at me and he said, "How long is it going to take you?" And I said, 2 hours. And he said, "Well, according to my math, you're not making $2,500 an hour. So that's a pretty darn good use of your time." And I said, "Okay, fine, I'll go do it." And that I ended up getting the money. So you have to think about it in terms of time, and it helps you organize the business. And seriously, for-profit, nonprofit companies in $0 in revenue up to 2 million, there are so many opportunities for free money out there, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing that, because I won 6 figures in free money that I didn't have to pay back, and no one asked what I did with it. Obviously used it as a business and exited, but literally there was no strings attached to that, and it changed my life.
Hashtag dad math instead of girl math, dad math. Kat, where can listeners find you and follow you and connect and learn more?
So our programming and education can be found at power2pitch.com. And of course, I'm very active on LinkedIn at Kat Weaver, K-A-T Weaver. And then we are adding more free content and videos to our YouTube channel at Power to Pitch. So those are our top 3 places and to be able to connect with us. And you can always DM me from there if you have any more questions about the grant or pitching side of things.
Thank you so much for joining us. All of Kat's information, and I think a discount code if you want to check out Power to Pitch is going to be below in the show notes. I encourage you to follow her on LinkedIn for sure. I do, and I learn something every time I see one of her posts. Kat, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been so fun and so enlightening talking to you. And I just appreciate everything you're doing for women founders and entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Well, I'm so honored. That was so kind. And it's been so fun chatting with you. And I think this podcast is such an incredible and needed resource for more women out there. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Girls Make Bank. If you like what you've heard, please remember to subscribe, like, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Please review and share our show to help spread the word and help your girls make bank. And I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram, or visit honeybeesgroup.co. Until next time, friends.